The racism part of Roseanne's tweet grabbed the headlines for good reason. The first part of her tweet has actually largely gone unnoticed. As a reminder, and here's the tweet on your screen. Roseanne tweeted, Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes had a baby equals VJ, referring to former Obama advisor Valerie Jarrett, a black woman born in Iran to American parents. Now, the anti-Muslim sentiments of that tweet really has gotten no attention whatsoever until now. I want to bring in our guests, Khalid Beydoun, author of American Islamophobia and associate professor at the University of Detroit School of Law, Simon Bozeman, reporter for Al Jazeera's year-long investigation into Islamophobia in this country titled Islamophobia Inc., and Sabrina Siddiqui, political reporter for The Guardian. Great to have all of you join us. Khalid, let me begin with you. We've seen very little condemnation of the Muslim Brotherhood part of that tweet. I don't think a lot of people picked up on it. I think obviously the focus has been on the racist part of it. Do you think that she would have lost her show if that was the only part of the tweet and didn't make the racist reference?
Not at all. I don't think she would have lost her show if she would have stopped typing after the Muslim Brotherhood. I think we can see from her Twitter timeline over the years, we could see from her television show, we could see from the language she's engaged in that anti-Muslim rhetoric, that Islamophobia is not only justifiable, it's something that we've given a pass to, whether it's a high-profile celebrity like Roseanne or whether it's a politician like Trump. So I think not. I think that she would have kept her show if she didn't make the statement, the anti-black racist statement, likening Valerie Jarrett to an ape.
So I know that Simon Roseanne has a history of this kind of thing. In fact, in 2015, she retweeted a meme that Jarrett was a secret Muslim operative and has also retweeted memes that Obama administration was filled with members of the Muslim Brotherhood. Tell us a little bit about the history behind how and why the label of using the Muslim Brotherhood is a smear tactic among certain members of the conservative or right in this country.
When she's accusing her of being part of the Muslim Brotherhood, what she's accusing her of being is a seditious element within American politics, a fifth column, a secret society set to undermine American values. Within the Islamophobia movement in America, the Muslim Brotherhood is a label like communism was used decades ago. They paint it as an octopus with tentacles in all aspects of political society. The Islamophobia industry have accused congressmen who are Muslims of being part of the Muslim Brotherhood. Keith Ellison, Andre Carson, they've accused Barack Obama of being members of the Muslim Brotherhood. And what it does is undermining the American political Muslim voice, and that's its intent, and that's its desire, and that's what its outcome is.
I want to turn to the administration itself that you were just talking about, Simon. A Wall Street Journal story about John Bolton's chief of staff, Fred Fleitz, who was hired away from an anti-Muslim group called the Center for Security Policy, one of the more controversial ones. The Journal says that Fleitz co-authored a book that claims that 80% of mosques in America are, quote, incubators of, at best, subversion and at worst, violence, and should be treated accordingly. Other reports say that Fleitz, who is a senior vice president for policy and programs, said the Muslim Brotherhood has achieved influence over the highest ranks of the U.S. government and that there should be a new House Un-American Activities Committee to root out secret Muslims in government. Sabrina, how does someone like this, with these views, who represented an organization with its track record as being one of the most notorious Islamophobic organizations in this country, get such an important position on the National Security Council?
Well, I think it's notable that there are a number of officials in this administration who have espoused what one can openly say are Islamophobic views. You think back to Michael Flynn, who was the president's first national security advisor. He had peddled a lot of conspiracy theories around Muslims and flirted with very right-wing ideology with respect to Islam. You have a president, ultimately, who openly campaigned on banning all Muslims from coming into the U.S., flirted with the idea of a Muslim registry, made false claims about Muslims celebrating on the roof of New Jersey after 9/11. That, of course, never happened. And he has continued to use a lot of the same language when talking about Muslims as president. And so it sets a tone from the top. I think a lot of the anti-Muslim rhetoric used to be more on the fringe, and now it's very much part of the mainstream of the Republican Party because President Trump himself, as we know, has made many derogatory statements about Muslims, and he's never really walked them back.
And interestingly, to that point, Khalid, that Sabrina brought up about this becoming more mainstream, I know that you recently wrote an article for The Guardian, and it actually has a really interesting point to it, which is that there is Islamophobia on the rise among the liberals in what is called liberal Islamophobia, saying it was more insidious than right-wing bigotry. Why do you say that?
Yeah, I think, above all, it's dangerous to sort of caricature Islamophobia as something specifically coming from the right. I mean, it's more explicit, it's more brazen on the right with politicians like Trump and with personalities like Roseanne, but it's also present on the left. I think you see some of the same stereotypes, you see some of the same simplistic sort of assessments coming from really popular, celebrated figures on the left. Bill Maher comes to mind. On his television show, he's engaged in spewing the same sort of, harmful, vile illustrations of Islam and Muslims as being this, monolithic, demonist sort of element. So I think what's happening on the right is in some respects emboldening the rise and emergence of Islamophobia on the left. The correlation, I think, is really critical.
Yeah, it's very interesting when you see it on both sides, both on the liberal side as well as the conservative side. Simon, I know that you've investigated this Islamophobia Inc., so to speak, for the better part of a year. Based on your reporting, how deeply rooted is Islamophobia in American culture and American society and our politics?
Oh, I think it's completely interwoven with the conservative movement in America. You've got millions and millions of dollars from conservative funding organizations that are flowing into organizations that the SPLC will say are anti-Muslim. The Center for Security Policy, which Frank Gaffney, Fred Fleitz came from, is receiving millions of dollars from the Donors Trust, the Donors Capital Fund, which are dark money donation vehicles for the conservative movement. So these are organizations which, in the previous history of funded organizations like the Heritage Foundation, they're now funding the Center for Security Policy, Act for America, Pamela Geller, Robert Spencer, fringe members 5 years ago, and now going to dinner at Donald Trump's the White House.
Very quickly, Sabrina, in 2016, you wrote an article about reporting while Muslim. It definitely got a lot of attention. Certainly went viral. How you covered the presidential election back then when you look back at it, can you speak to how the president's rhetoric has affected you and others in the U.S., and does it give you any hope that this year the president will hold a Ramadan dinner, since we're here, hold an Iftar while we're in the month of Ramadan?
Well, certainly last year the president broke with tradition to not host the annual White House Iftar. There's been no indication that he plans to reverse course and reinstate that event this year. I think ultimately the fundamental point here is that the president's rhetoric has not changed since the campaign. There was a great deal of speculation as to whether he would perhaps mediate some of his words once he understood the power of the office. Instead, you have seen him continue and engage in some of the same incendiary rhetoric anytime there is a terrorist attack, jumping to conclusions before we even have the appropriate intelligence. And certainly you have not seen this president ever apologize. So even as the White House expresses outrage, for example, the initial purpose of the segment over what Samantha Bee said about Ivanka Trump, no one in this administration has ever issued any apology for any of the statements that they've made. So again, it goes back to his point that the tone is ultimately set from the top.
Yeah, and it's safe to say that I don't think anyone would have probably taken offense to that smear by Roseanne in reference to Valerie Jarrett being a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. All right, Sabrina Siddiqui, stay with us. Khalid Beydoun, Simon Bozeman, great to have both of your insights this evening.